February 26th, 1991, 4 p.m. local time, the Iraqi desert. The weather is not just bad, it is apocalyptic. A shamal, a violent, blinding sandstorm has descended upon the borderlands between Iraq and Kuwait. Visibility is less than 50 meters. The wind howls at 60 miles per hour, stripping paint from steel and turning the horizon into a churning wall of brown opacity. To the naked eye, the world ends at the tip of your own hand. Inside the cramped, sweltering turret of a T-72 tank belonging to the Tawakalna division of the Republican Guard, the mood is tense, but not panicked. Not yet. These are the elite. They are the steel fist of Baghdad, battle-hardened by 8 brutal years of war against Iran. They are dug in, their hulls buried deep in the sand, leaving only their low-profile turrets exposed. They are positioned in a classic defensive kill zone, waiting for the coalition forces to stumble into their trap. According to every military manual written since the Second World War, looking at this weather, the battle is paused. Air support is grounded. Helicopters cannot fly. Laser rangefinders are scattered by the dust. Thermal sights, usually effective, should be degraded by the moisture and the sheer density of the suspended sand. The Soviet advisors who trained these men, and the Soviet doctrine they follow, dictate a simple reality. If you cannot see the enemy cannot see you. The Iraqi commander peers through his periscope. Nothing, just a swirling void of beige. He checks the map. Intelligence says the Americans are miles away, bogged down, blind, and terrified of the elite Republican Guard waiting for them. The Iraqis have the advantage. They know the terrain. They are stationary. They are ready to ambush a blinded enemy. Then, the impossible happens. There is no muzzle flash. There is no sound of a distant engine. There is no warning. Suddenly, the T-72 tank to the commander's immediate right, positioned 400 meters away, simply ceases to exist. 1 second, it is a 40-ton war machine. The next, a catastrophic explosion tears the turret purely off the chassis, tossing the 12-ton steel cap into the air like a toy. The ammunition carousel inside ignites instantly, creating a vertical column of fire that pierces the dust storm. The radio crackles. Confusion. Screaming. "Mine! It was a mine!" Someone yells over the net. The commander grips his optics. A mine? Impossible. They are in a defensive line. They haven't moved. Was it an artillery shell? No. There was no whistle, no barrage, just a single, surgical strike out of nowhere. Before the commander can issue an order, a second explosion rocks the line. Another T-72 tank, this one 500 meters to the left, erupts in flames. The shockwave thuds against the commander's hull. Panic begins to set in. The Iraqi crews frantically traverse their turrets, scanning the brown void. They flip on their active infrared searchlights, the lunar systems mounted next to their main guns. These lights beam out infrared energy, invisible to the naked eye but visible to their night vision scopes. It is a fatal mistake. But they do not know that yet. Through their rudimentary sights, they see nothing but the backscatter of their own lights, reflecting off the sand particles. It is like turning on high beams in a thick fog. They are blinding themselves. "Where is the fire coming from?" the radio operator screams. "Contact front! Contact front!" another voice cries out. But there is no coordinate, no distance. The Iraqi commander strains his eyes. He is looking for the muzzle flash. Every tank gun, even the modern ones, spits out a massive tongue of fire when it shoots. In this darkness, a muzzle flash should be a beacon. It should give away the enemy's position instantly. But there are no flashes. There is only the howling wind and the rhythmic, terrifying sound of metal being torn apart. Thud. Another explosion. Thud. Another. It is a systematic dismantling. One by one, the pride of the Republican Guard is being picked off by an invisible assassin. The impacts are impossibly precise. The projectiles are striking the turret rings, the most vulnerable point, with mathematical accuracy. And they are doing it through a sandstorm that has reduced visibility to 0. This defies physics. This defies logic. Welcome to the channel, Cold War Impact. Today we are dissecting the 23 minutes that changed warfare forever, and the technology that turned a battle into a massacre. If you enjoy deep dives into military history and the hidden stories of the Cold War, make sure to subscribe. Back in the turret, the fear is turning into a primal horror. The Iraqis are fighting a ghost. Reports start flooding back to the rear echelons and eventually to the intelligence officers analyzing the chaotic flow of battle. The reports are nonsensical. Frontline units are claiming they are under fire from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. They are claiming they are being hit by tanks, moving at 40 miles per hour through the storm. To the Soviet observers and military analysts monitoring the situation, this data reads like hysteria. No tank in the world can move that fast off-road in zero visibility without crashing. No gunner can acquire a target at 2,000 meters through a heavy sandstorm. The laws of optics do not allow it. They suspect the Americans must be using some form of short-range radar-guided missile, or perhaps a new type of low-altitude drone that can see through the dust. They are scrambling to understand the signature of the weapon. Is it the British Challenger? The American M60? The Iraqi crews, desperate to survive, begin to fire blindly into the storm. They fire high-explosive fragmentation rounds, hoping to suppress whatever infantry or light vehicles are attacking them. They assume they are fighting scouts. But the return fire does not stop. It accelerates. The commander of the lead Iraqi company realizes the terrifying truth. The enemy is not stopping to fire. In traditional tank warfare, the warfare the Soviets taught them, you must stop the tank to shoot accurately at long range. You brake, you aim, you fire. But the explosions tearing through his platoon are coming in a rhythm that suggests the enemy is closing in at full speed. They are not stopping, he yells into the handset. They are firing on the move. They are firing on the move. Suddenly, a kinetic energy penetrator, a dart of depleted uranium moving at Mach 5, slams into the glacis plate of the commander's tank. It doesn't explode. It liquefies the armor. The penetrator passes through the thickest steel protection the Soviet Union ever designed for export, as if it were wet cardboard. The interior of the tank is instantly superheated. The overpressure kills the crew instantly before their brains can even register the sound of the impact. From the outside, the tank shudders, then goes still. Smoke pours from the hatches. The impossible event has just become a massacre. The Republican Guard, dug in, prepared, and heavily armored, is being erased. And they still have not seen a single enemy vehicle. To the surviving crews, this is not war, it is sorcery. They are being hunted by something that sees without eyes and kills without flame. The sandstorm, which was supposed to be their greatest ally, has become their tomb. As the surviving tanks try to retreat, reversing blindly into the swirling dust, they realize the trap has already snapped shut. The enemy isn't just in front of them. The explosions are starting to come from the flanks. The ghost is everywhere. The radio network of the Tawakalna division has dissolved into a cacophony of static and terror. Inside the command track, a Soviet-made BMP vehicle converted for battlefield management, the scene is one of utter paralysis. The senior Iraqi officers are staring at their tactical maps, grease pencils hovering over grid squares that should be secure. According to the map, they are protected by a screen of scouts, a minefield, and the blinding curtain of the sandstorm. But the reports screaming through the speakers tell a different story. A story that doesn't make sense. Battalion 2 is gone. Repeat, Battalion 2 is non-operational. A voice cracks, distorted by panic. What do you mean gone? The operations officer shouts back. They are dug in. They have heavy armor. They are burning, sir. All of them. We cannot see the enemy. We cannot see anything. The officers exchange glances. This isn't a battle. It is a deletion. In military doctrine, a unit takes 10% casualties, and it is considered engaged. It takes 30%, and it is combat ineffective. But Battalion 2 has suffered 100% casualties in less than 10 minutes. The Iraqi strategy relied on a specific Soviet calculation, the exchange ratio. They knew NATO tanks were better, but they believed that for every 3 T-70, 2 tanks lost, they would destroy 1 American tank. In a defensive war, that is a winning ratio, but the ratio currently stands at 0 to 50. Desperate to regain control, the brigade commander orders a counterattack. If they cannot see the enemy from their defensive holes, they must move. They must close the distance. It is a suicide order, but staying still means death. Hundreds of engines roar to life. The remaining T-72 tanks lurch out of their sand berms, their tracks churning the loose desert floor. The plan is to charge into the storm, close the range to under 800 meters, the knife-fighting range where their lower-quality optics won't matter as much. At that range, their 125mm guns can penetrate almost anything. As the Iraqi armor moves forward, the gunners resort to their last technological hope, the lunar infrared searchlight. Mounted next to the main gun of every T-72 tank is a large circular emitter. When activated, it blasts a beam of infrared light forward. The human eye cannot see it, but the tank's primitive night vision scope can. It acts like a flashlight in the dark. The order goes out. Active R! Active R! Find targets! Across the desert front, hundreds of infrared beams flicker on, cutting through the swirling dust. To the Iraqi gunners, the world suddenly gains a grainy, green-hued shape. They can see the dunes. They can see the burning wrecks of their comrades. They feel a moment of relief. They can see. But they do not realize that they have just signed their own death warrants. To the enemy waiting in the storm, those infrared searchlights do not look like faint beams. Through the advanced sensors of the American tanks, those lights look like supernovas. The Iraqis are unknowingly holding up flares in a dark room, screaming, "Here I am!" The massacre accelerates. The incoming fire changes. It is no longer just single shots. It is a rhythmic drumbeat of destruction. The American tanks are identifying the source of the IR beams and putting a round directly into the light source. An Iraqi gunner in the lead platoon screams in triumph. "I see a shape. Silhouette! 12 o'clock!" He sees a low, angular shadow moving through the dust, perhaps 1,000 meters away. He slews the turret. He lays the crosshairs. Fire! The T-72 tank rocks back as the massive 125mm shell leaves the barrel. The crew waits for the impact. They wait for the explosion. But the shell disappears into the sandstorm. Miss. The Soviet optics on the T-72 tanks are not stabilized well enough for this weather. The laser rangefinder is scattering off the dust particles, giving false readings. The gunner thought the target was at 1,000 meters, but the computer read the dust cloud at 200 meters. The shell flew harmlessly over the enemy's head. Before the autoloader can cycle a new round, a process that takes 7 agonizing seconds, the retribution arrives. A silver streak flashes through the dust. It is moving so fast that the air around it ionizes, creating a brief glowing trail. It hits the T-72 tank just below the turret ring. There is a sickening crack, the sound of metal failing under extreme stress. This is not the boom of a high-explosive round. This is the sound of a kinetic penetrator, a solid rod of dense metal punching through armor plate. The rod enters the crew compartment. It shreds the gunner. It passes through the commander's station. It keeps going, punching out the back of the turret, slicing through the engine block, and exiting the rear of the tank. The kinetic energy is so vast that everything inside the tank that isn't welded down is sucked out through the exit hole. The pressure change turns the crew into biological mist. The tank coasts to a halt, a smoking ruin. From the perspective of the surviving Iraqis, the enemy is invincible. They are firing back, they are maneuvering, they are doing everything the Soviet manuals told them to do. But their shells are missing, and the enemy's shells never miss. Rumors begin to fly over the panic-stricken radio net. "They are using nuclear rounds," one soldier cries, seeing the white-hot glow of the depleted uranium impacts. "They have radar guns," implies another. The fear is not just about dying, it is about the total loss of agency. The Iraqis are participants in a battle where they are blindfolded, while their opponent is watching them in high definition. In the rear, the intelligence officers are paralyzed. They know the Americans have night vision. The Soviets have night vision too. But night vision is supposed to be green, grainy, and short range. It is supposed to be easily blinded by bright lights or dust. What is happening out there defies the known capabilities of image intensification technology. The Americans are seeing through the dust. They are seeing through the smoke of burning oil wells. This suggests a technology that doesn't rely on light at all. And if that is true, then every tank in the Iraqi inventory, and by extension, every tank in the Soviet inventory, is obsolete. The T-72 tanks, the T-64 tanks, even the T-80 tanks, they are all designed to fight a war of optics. If the enemy has bypassed optics entirely, the Cold War balance of power has just collapsed in the middle of the Iraqi desert. But there is no time for geopolitical analysis. The front line is dissolving. Suddenly, a new sound cuts through the storm. It is the deep turbine whine of the American engines. They are close. They are closing the distance to finish the job. The Ghost is no longer just shooting from the void. It is coming to eat them. The battle has now raged for 15 minutes. To the Iraqi Republican Guard, it feels like 15 years. The surviving elements of the Tawakalna division are no longer fighting as a cohesive unit. They are fighting as terrified individuals trapped in steel coffins. The brigade commander has lost contact with 50% of his force. The desert floor is littered with the burning husks of T-72 tanks, their turrets popped off like champagne corks, their hulls glowing cherry red from the intense heat of the ammunition fires. But amidst the slaughter, a veteran Iraqi captain makes a desperate, logical decision. He falls back to the oldest survival tactic in tank warfare: concealment. Pop smoke, and reverse," he screams. The remaining tanks in his platoon fire their smoke grenade launchers. Canisters explode in the air, instantly creating a thick white wall of phosphorus smoke. This chemical cloud is designed specifically to block visible light and scatter laser beams. It is the ultimate shield. Combined with the raging sandstorm, the visibility is now effectively negative. The captain breathes a sigh of relief. He is blind, yes, but so is the enemy. No optical system on Earth can see through a sandstorm and a phosphorus smokescreen. He orders his driver to cut the engine to reduce their noise signature. They sit in the silent, swirling white void, waiting for the Americans to stumble past them so they can ambush them from the rear. It is a perfect trap. According to the Soviet manuals, they are now invisible. But they are about to learn the most terrifying lesson of the Cold War. 200 meters away, an American M1A1 Abrams tank glides to a halt. Its gas turbine engine emits a low, high-pitched whine, barely audible over the wind. It does not rumble like a diesel engine, it hisses like a jet. Inside the American turret, the gunner is not looking through a piece of glass. He is looking into a digital abyss. He is not looking for light, he is looking for heat. To the American gunner, the sandstorm does not exist. The phosphorus smoke, the captain's ultimate shield, is transparent. Why? Because the smoke is cool. The sand is cool. But the T-72 tank? The T-72 tank is a 40-ton radiator. Its engine block is radiating heat at 180 degrees. Its tracks, hot from friction, are glowing. The gun barrel, warm from the earlier shots, stands out like a neon tube. On the American thermal display, the Iraqi tank isn't hidden. It is a bright white ghost floating in a black void. The smoke that the Iraqi captain thought was saving him is actually framing him. The American gunner barely has to aim. The computer calculates the lead, the wind, the temperature, and the barometric pressure. "Gunner, coax. Troops in the open," the commander says, spotting infantry trying to flee. But then he corrects himself. "No, tank. Flank shot. Identified." "Up!" the loader shouts. "Fire." Inside the Iraqi tank, the captain is straining his ears, listening for the clanking tracks of the enemy. He hears nothing but the wind. He feels safe. He reaches for his canteen. The world turns white. The depleted uranium dart punches through the side armor of the T-72 tank. It moves so fast that the physics of solid matter break down. The armor flows like liquid. The projectile creates a spray of spalling, molten metal fragments that shotgun into the crew compartment. The captain never hears the shot. The projectile moves faster than the speed of sound. He is dead before the sonic boom arrives. This scene repeats itself up and down the line. Every tactic the Iraqis use backfires. They hide in hull-down positions behind sand berms, thinking the sand protects them. But the heat of their exhaust plumes rises above the berms, giving the Americans a perfect aiming point. The Americans shoot through the top of the sand berms, the dense penetrators barely slowing down before striking the turrets behind them. They try to power down their tanks completely to go cold, but a 40-ton block of steel takes hours to cool down. In the freezing desert night, a warm tank glows even brighter against the cold background. The psychological impact of this is shattering. Iraqi crews begin to bail out of perfectly functional tanks. They throw open the hatches and run into the desert, preferring to take their chances with the elements rather than stay inside the target magnets. They have realized a horrifying truth. The tank is no longer a weapon, it is a trap. To the west, a chaotic transmission is intercepted by coalition intelligence. It is an Iraqi battalion commander weeping into his radio. "We cannot see them," he screams. "They are shooting us from the future. They are demons." This is not hyperbole. To a soldier trained in the analog era of warfare, where you aim with your eye and shoot what you see, this new reality is supernatural. The enemy is omnipresent. The enemy is silent. And the enemy never misses. But the final twist of the knife comes when the Americans finally close the distance. As the American line advances, rolling over the burning wreckage of the Republican Guard, the surviving Iraqi infantry huddled in their foxholes finally get a look at their executioners. They expect to see monsters. They expect to see giant, hulking machines, bristling with lights and radar dishes. Instead, they see flat, angular slabs of steel, painted a dull tan. No searchlights, no beams. Just dark, glass slits that look like dead eyes. The M1 Abrams tanks look asleep. They look dormant. They aren't emitting any light at all. They are rolling through the apocalypse in total blackout mode. How can a machine that looks so blind see everything? The mystery that has decimated the fourth largest army in the world in less than 23 minutes lies inside a small, unassuming box next to the gunner's face. A box that contains a technology so sensitive it was classified higher than the nuclear bomb codes for a decade. The battle is effectively over. The slaughter is complete. But the question remains, what exactly was that technology? And why did the Soviet Union, a superpower that spent billions on tank warfare, have absolutely no answer for it? The answer lies in the physics of the electromagnetic spectrum, and a critical mistake made by Soviet scientists in the 1970s. The mystery of the ghost in the sand was not magic, it was physics. And the massacre of the Iraqi Republican Guard was not decided on the battlefield of 1991. It was decided inside a laboratory in Texas in the 1970s. The device that annihilated the Tawakalna division was the AN, VSG-2 thermal imaging system. To understand why this was such a shock, we have to understand the massive gamble the Soviet Union made during the Cold War, a gamble they lost catastrophically. For decades, night vision meant one thing: image intensification. This is the green, grainy footage you see in movies. It works by taking existing light from the moon, the stars, or distant cities, and amplifying it thousands of times. If it is pitch black, it doesn't work. If there is too much smoke or dust, the light scatters, and the image becomes a white blur. The Soviets perfected this. Their T-72 tanks were equipped with excellent image intensifiers. They assumed the next war would be fought with this technology. But the Americans realized that image intensification had a fatal flaw. It relied on visible light. And on a battlefield, visible light is easily blocked by smoke, fog, sand, and camouflage. So, the US military pivoted to a completely different part of the electromagnetic spectrum: thermal energy. The M1 Abrams gunner was not looking at light. He was looking at heat. Every object in the universe with a temperature above absolute zero emits thermal radiation. The hotter it is, the more it emits. A T-72 tank engine operates at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Even the friction of the tracks against the sand creates massive heat signatures. The genius of the American thermal sight was that it detected long-wave infrared radiation. Here is the key scientific reveal. Visible light cannot pass through a sandstorm. The particles of sand are roughly the same size as the wavelength of visible light, so they block it. But long-wave infrared waves are much larger. They are huge compared to the dust particles. So, when the thermal radiation travels from the Iraqi tank to the American tank, it simply flows around the dust particles. To the thermal sensor, the sandstorm was literally transparent. While the Iraqi gunners were staring into a wall of brown dust, the American gunners were looking at a high-contrast, black and white television screen where the enemy tanks glowed like bright white light bulbs against a dark background. The impossible accuracy happened because the thermal sight could spot the heat difference of a fraction of a degree. The Abrams computer could distinguish the hot engine deck of a T-72 tank from a cold rock at 3,000 meters. But the tragedy for the Iraqis was deeper than just being blind. Remember those infrared searchlights they turned on in Part 2? The lunar lights? That was the fatal flaw of Soviet doctrine. The Soviets knew their passive night vision was weak, so they equipped every tank with an active infrared searchlight. It acted like a spotlight that only their scopes could see. It was a brilliant idea in 1960, but in 1991, against a thermal imager, it was suicide. When the Iraqis turned on those lights, they generated a massive source of heat and infrared energy. On the American thermal displays, the Iraqi tanks didn't just appear, they flared up. It was the equivalent of a soldier standing up in a dark trench and lighting a road flare to see better. The Americans didn't even have to search for targets. The Iraqis highlighted themselves. The battle ended in 23 minutes of actual firing. The numbers are staggering. In the broader campaign, the coalition destroyed over 3,000 Iraqi tanks. The number of M1 Abrams tanks destroyed by Iraqi fire? 0. Not a single Abrams was penetrated by an Iraqi tank shell. The only American losses came from friendly fire and mines. When the reports reached Moscow, the blood drained from the faces of the Soviet generals. They weren't just watching their ally lose, they were watching their own obsolescence. The Soviet Union had built an armada of 50,000 tanks based on the premise of heavy armor and big guns. They assumed they could flood the plains of Europe and overwhelm NATO. But the Battle of 73 Easting and the destruction of the Republican Guard proved that armor thickness no longer mattered. Speed didn't matter. Numbers didn't matter. If you cannot see the enemy, and the enemy can see you, you are not a combatant. You are a target. The M1 Abrams had fundamentally broken the equation of tank warfare. It proved that in the modern age, information is armor. The ghost that hunted the Iraqis in the dust wasn't a monster. It was a sensor made of mercury-cadmium telluride, cooled to -300 degrees, sitting quietly in a box, turning the chaos of war into a simple digital shooting gallery. The Cold War ended that day in the desert, not with a nuclear bang, but with the silent, glowing image of a T-72 tank burning in the night, destroyed by an enemy it never even saw. This has been Cold War Impact. If you want to understand the machines that defined history, subscribe and turn on notifications. The fog of war is thick, but we are here to clear it.